What we are going to learn in this lecture: meaning of frequency distribution and important terms associated with it, and graphical representation of a frequency distribution. As discussed in a previous lecture, frequency data occur when we classify statistical data in respect of either a variable or an attribute. A frequency distribution may be defined as a tabular representation of statistical data, usually in an ascending order, relating to a measurable characteristic according to individual value or a group of values of the characteristic under study. So here comes the meaning of frequency distribution. It is a statistical table that distributes the total frequency to a number of classes. Now let's do a question. A review of the first 30 pages of a statistical book reveals the following printing mistakes. Here are the printing mistakes done in 30 pages. Now we have to make a frequency distribution of printing mistakes. Now for constructing a frequency distribution, first we will write down all the values in a row. As we can see here that there are mistakes from 0 to 6. So we will prepare a column. We will prepare a table with 3 columns in it. First column will be of printing mistakes, in which printing mistakes are written down from 0 to 6. Then second column will be of tally marks and the third column will be of frequency. First we will fill our second column, that is of tally marks. Now first figure is 0. We will cancel it out and write 1 against 0. Then the next mistake is 1 and we will cancel down it and write 1 in front of 1. Then 3. So we will write 1 in front of 3. Then 3 comes again. It means 3 comes twice. So we will write another mark for 3. Then comes 2. So we will write 1 in front of 2. Similar we will do for another numbers, and we will cancel the numbers and write the points, or we can say tally marks, against each the numbers. Then comes 3, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 6, 1 and 4. Then what we will do, in order to fill the third column, that is of frequency, we will count the tally marks against each value and write the required or calculated frequency. As we can see here, in front of 0 we have 5 marks. So we will write down its frequency as 5. In case of 1 mistake, there are 5 marks. So we will write down its frequency as 5. In case of 2 mistakes, there are 6 marks. So we will write down its frequency as 6, and so on for the remaining values. So this is our required frequency distribution table. Let's do another question for practice. Following are the weights in kgs of 36 BBA students of St. Xavier's College. So these are the weights of 36 students. And what we have to do? We have to construct the frequency distribution of weights taking class length as 5. Now here is some different question. We have to take our class length as 5. And we know that range is equal to maximum value minus minimum value. Here maximum weight is 73 kgs and minimum weight is 44 kgs. So our range comes to 29 kgs. Now number of class interval into class length is equivalent to range. And we have to find number of class interval. Class length is given 5 in the question and range we have calculated as 29. So from here we can see number of class interval is equivalent to 6. We always take the next integer as the number of class intervals so as to include both the minimum and maximum values. Here is our required frequency distribution table. We put weight in kgs in the first column, telemarks in second column, and number of students, or we can say frequency, in the third column. But here we took the weight in the form of class intervals, that is from 44 to 48 there are 3 students, from 49 to 53 there are 4 students, from 54 to 58 there are 5 students, and so on. Now we will discuss some important terms associated with the frequency distribution. Our first term is class limit. What is it? Corresponding to a class interval, the class limits may be defined as the minimum value and the maximum value the class interval may contain. The minimum value is known as the lower class limit and the maximum value is known as the upper class limit. For the frequency distribution of weights of BBA students, the lower class limit and upper class limit of the first class interval was 44 kgs and 48 kgs respectively. Second term is class boundary. Class boundaries may be defined as the actual class limit of a class interval. Third is midpoint or mid value or class mark. Corresponding to a class interval, this may be defined as the total of the two class limits or class boundaries and to be divided this by 2. So we have midpoint is equal to lower class limit plus upper class limit upon 2, or we can say lower class boundary plus upper class boundary upon 2. Next term is width or size of a class interval. The width of a class interval may be defined as the difference between the upper class boundary and the lower class boundary of any particular class interval. For example, if we took our previous question of BBA students, in that case, class length or width is 48.5 kgs minus 43.5 kgs, that is 5 kgs for the first class interval, and similarly it will remain the same for the other class intervals also. Then comes cumulative frequency. Cumulative frequency may be defined as the number of observations less than the value or less than or equal to the class boundary, or we can calculate it by adding the corresponding frequencies of every value or every class interval. So if we add up the total frequencies, we get a cumulative frequency. Now we will study how to represent a frequency distribution graphically. There are many ways for graphical representation, but here we will consider the following types of graphical representation of frequency distribution. First is histogram or area diagram, second is frequency polygon, and third is ogives or cumulative frequency graphs. So let's discuss each of them in detail. First is histogram or area diagram. This is a very convenient way to represent a frequency distribution. Histogram helps us to get an idea of the frequency curve of the variable under study. In order to draw histogram, the class limits are first converted to the corresponding class boundaries, and a series of adjacent rectangles, one against each class interval, with the class interval as base or breadth and the frequency or frequency density usually when the class interval are not uniform as length or altitude is shown in the graph. The histogram for the distribution of weight of 36 BBA students is shown here. It is a required histogram for that frequency distribution table. Also we can calculate the mod of any frequency distribution from the histogram. As you can see here, mod is here 66.5 kgs. Second is frequency polygon. Usually frequency polygon is meant for single frequency distribution. However, we also apply it for grouped frequency distribution provided the width of the class interval remains the same. A frequency curve can be regarded as a limiting form of frequency polygon. Now, in order to draw a frequency polygon, we plot the values of x with denoting the midpoint of its class interval and f, the corresponding frequency, being the number of class intervals. The plotted points are joined successively by line segments, and the figure so drawn is given the shape of a polygon, a closed figure, by joining the two extreme ends of the drawn figure to two additional points. So here is the required frequency polygon of the BBA students. We can also obtain a frequency polygon starting with a histogram by adding the midpoints of the upper sides of the rectangles successively and then completing the figure by joining the two ends as shown here. Third one is ogives or cumulative frequency graph. By plotting cumulative frequency against a respective class boundary, we get ogives. As such, there are two ogives: less than type ogives obtained by taking less than cumulative frequency on the vertical axis, and more than type ogives by plotting more than type cumulative frequencies on the vertical axis and thereafter joining the plotted points successively by line segments. Ogives may be considered for obtaining quartiles graphically. If a perpendicular is drawn from the point of intersection of the two ogives on the horizontal axis, then the x value of this point gives us the value of median, the second or medial quartile. Ogives further can be put into use for making short-term projections. Now, this figure depicts the ogives and the determination of the quartiles. So this figure gives us the following information. First quartile or lower quartile Q1 is 55 kgs here. Second quartile or median is equal to 62.5 kgs here, and third quartile or upper quartile is equal to 68 kgs here. This is the required ogive for the distribution of weights of BBA students.